everybody, and I'm so happy to be with you today. My name is Paula Geisler, and I'm privileged to be at Smith Real Estate Office today because Viola Smith is here on my right. I have Nancy Ryan with me. I have Jim Ryan, and I have Murray Ryan. So with that introduction, I would like to hear about the beginnings. Whose dream was the Murray Hotel? And I believe, Murray, you could address that.
My father, who was Jim Ryan, and his father-in-law, my grandfather, W.D. Murray, bought some property on the corner of Texas and Broadway way back in the early to mid-30s. It was an old building. I think it was actually called the Broadway Hotel, I believe it was.
Yeah,
it was raised, and for several years they held onto the property. They had a tiny gasoline service station right in the center of the block, pending the ability to finance the construction of the new hotel, and things happened shortly after that. The two of them made numerous trips to El Paso and other places, finally arranged some financing for the construction of the original Murray Hotel. I believe it was 50 rooms with including an elevator, which was quite exciting for the time and days
I remember that.
in Silver City. They arranged for the property to be leased for a 10-year period. I think the original lessor was a guy named Julius Hines, and he was on the property the first several years. And shortly after that, Ray Helms, who had a very successful operation in Lawrenceburg, running, I think it was called the Hidalgo Hotel, he came in and ran it during most of the war years. And of course, Jim was aware of all this going on. He was probably an early teenager during the first part of it, and then as the years went by, he became more and more involved in it. I'd like to have him maybe comment on those early years, possibly his first memories of the construction and the occupancy of the hotel.
That's right. My dad and my grandfather decided in 1946 or 47 that 50 rooms was not enough, and that they should put an addition on the hotel, which would include a ballroom, which would make it viable for conferences to come and also for social activities to take place in Silver City. So they made the plans. The same architect that was the original designer of the hotel designed the addition, and a Frank Tatch, who was an up-and-coming general contractor in Silver City at the time, was awarded the contract, and construction took place in 1947 and 48, I think, and the addition was ready and opened in about 1949.
So in a sense, the idea for the Murray began before the war, and the war intervened, and then things pretty much picked up from the plans that you had begun back in 38. So the fact is, the high point of the era prior to today, which we're hoping is going to be fantastic and all, but with the 50s and the 60s, would you say that was when there was the most occupancy, the most things were happening here in the community?
Well, the early days during the war, the original 50 rooms were extremely successful because of activity from the Air Force Base in Deming. The service people would come up. And
yeah.
And then, yes, you're right, the early 60s and the 70s was a time of great success also.
Well, I'm sure there had to be some speculation prior to even construction about who these people were that you would attract, who would want to come here. What were the attractions to this region back in those earlier days?
Well, my dad was very instrumental in promoting visitors to Silver City to stay in the hotel, and he and others were very active in promoting what was at one time the Highway 260 Association, and later became the Highway 180 Association. And it was somewhat successful in attracting people coming through Silver City on the way to either Carlsbad or to Grand Canyon.
So it was a scenic highway,
yes,
and to stay here.
Right.
Another factor attracting was very nice accommodation for people visiting on business from El Paso, Tucson, Albuquerque, steady guests that made their reservation to stay in the Murray Hotel while they visited the mining area, mostly selling industrial supplies, heavy equipment. Jim had several that stayed there, wanted the same room regardless. If that particular room hadn't been reserved for this particular customer, all heck was to pay. There was one famous Irishman by the name of Dennis Shea, I think, that expected his room to be there available when he came, and Jim and his predecessors always accommodated people like that, because they were the lifeblood of the operation to have these steady customers. And then also it was a gathering place for local ranchers, probably within a radius of as much as 60, 70 miles around Silver City. This was kind of the gathering point for them to visit their friends, do the business they had to at the local banks and whatever else the activity was. So, and also need to recall that in those years there were virtually no facilities known as motels in these days. There were some facsimiles of hotels, but virtually none. The large chains had not discovered this area yet, and so the Murray Hotel, to a degree, had a monopoly based on the quality of the building and the service and whatnot.
I saw that happening. But you know, I'm so into feng shui, the psychology of space, and Nancy and I were talking earlier about, she said she raised her children in that, off and on in the Murray, and what was the atmosphere like in there as a homemaker and a mother?
It was very family oriented. The employees would carry our little boy around, and they would, one of them got stuck on the elevator one time, and of course, major disaster, and they all helped. It was very comfortable family feeling.
And Viola, you came in with, you said in the 50s, and that little tiny office as you go in the Murray was your first office here?
Well, originally Fern Shell Realtor had one side to the left of the door. And after I had been with another realtor for 1 year, I came down to be with her. So they opened up the other little, shall we call it, cubbyhole on the right-hand side, which was my office space. And I would say, if Jim can probably tell about this, it's 8 by 8, it was big. And so there was room for a desk and 2 chairs. And the secretary's desk was out in the lobby. And that's how we worked. It was really interesting because even though our space was limited, the traffic through the hotel was most beneficial to a realtor. And as Jim and Murray said, we had ranchers that came through, business people that came through, and you could just, and there were no other facilities that could even come close to what this hotel could furnish. Now I could probably talk a little bit on the operation of the hotel, because of course every day of my real estate life while we were here, I looked at that guy's face and watched him function. And of course Murray was in and out, and I saw Nancy with her kids. I was even privileged to hold their baby, that last baby they had there, and things like that.
You had your baby
The thing
there?
I observed, the thing that I observed about Jim was he really was an excellent manager. He wasn't terribly old, but he was all business. And the lobby is very lovely and stuff, and you didn't see anybody hanging around in there that wasn't supposed to be there, because pretty soon this young man would come down and tap him on the shoulder and say, "Move on, this."
Very satisfying. Very satisfying, I would think.
And of course, my little cubicle was right next to the bar, and along about 3:30 or 4 it got a little bit noisy in there, but that was never a problem because it was always, the bar was pretty well contained and policed too.
Oh, those were safer, happier times. It seemed like people could party without things going over the limit. What was it called? The watering hole or the branding iron? Or?
Branding iron.
Yes. And did you come up with that name?
No, I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. One of my predecessors did that, and they had, it must have been 100 brands that were painted on the wall in the bar, And that was really,
And you heard stories and
right.
things like that.
There are some pretty well-known local ranchers that behaved most of the time, but sometimes they didn't.
Well, those were safer days.
To inject the point, any successful business is based on the loyalty and dedication of all the people working there, boss to employees. And Jim developed a magnificent level of loyalty. I'd like him and Nancy maybe to identify 2 or 3 of those old timers. George is one, and Paul, and I don't think there are any of them left, but some of their descendants probably are here, and they deserve an awful lot of recognition for their loyalty and hard work.
Yeah, those larger-than-life people. Who are they?
Well, there were 2 bellmen, Paul Johnson and George, and I can't think of George's last name.
I'm telling you, everybody that walked in that hotel loved George.
Yeah.
When he passed on, his funeral was at Fort Baird, and you would be surprised at the dignitaries from Silver City that were out to his funeral.
No.
I know Murray was there, and probably Jim.
And they were just great. They knew the guests, and they would introduce me to them, and they were really great. And then another fellow that was a bellman, Bobby Corral, who is still around in Silver City, and he was trained by Paul and George, and he picked it up and could call regular visitors by name just as soon as they walked in the door, and really made them feel welcome. And then another key person was the chef at the time, a fellow named Calvin Shaw, who had worked for the Santa Fe Railroad, the Fred Harvey system, as a chef. And he was one of these guys that worked 7 days a week, just did whatever it took.
Well, Jim, I believe his descendants are still caterers and provide.
That's the son.
The son? Okay.
The son of they were both called Cal.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
tradition.
And then we had 2 or 3 waitresses in the dining room that were just excellent. Dolly Cooper, and Nancy, what was the name of the lady that?
Is it Jerry?
Jerry, yeah. Jerry Ward. And,
She gave everybody a back rub.
Right.
I remember that.
Well,
Nearly got fired for it. Couldn't quite accept it.
really new waitress that came to work for us, and she became very skilled and good. But in her first few weeks there, one of the most prominent cattle growers in town came in, and he spent a lot of time there, and he sat at the counter in the coffee shop for lunch, and I've forgotten this lady's name, but she managed to spill ketchup on his brand new Stetson.
ooh,
And,
of course you picked up the cleaning
It was
bill.
purely an accident, and we replaced the hat.
Of course.
But those things like that happened.
I wish this could be the beginning of telling some of the stories of the good old days. I think people love to hear this, and it takes them back. I would love to hear some of the wilder parties. Mike Lewis, a person who was part of the early beginnings of the television station, Channel 17, in the Cats community, was a cook there himself in the later days, and he said many deals were cut in the Murray. That it was the place to be.
Oh, yeah.
To
Right.
maybe.
I'll attest to that in that little square office.
Well, you know, when I can remember in the 50s, Viola, walking through hotels, perhaps of the same kind ilk as the Murray, and there were lots of little boutiques and stores, little mini stores and beauty parlors. And did the Murray have that kind of first floor, like an arcade?
Well, yes, there were 3 shops that my dad and my granddad and the architect designed. And a lady named Mimi Bebo had a ladies' ready-to-wear store there.
Very.
And it was one of the stores in town that was considered the place to go for ladies.
Right.
And I don't remember who occupied the other store.
I'm vague on that too. Maybe Viola might remember.
When J. Wayne Woodbury had his office, that was part of the hotel complex.
Yes, but he occupied it at a later time. I can't
I see,
remember
okay.
who occupied that space in the early days.
That was before my time
Yeah.
too, so I don't know
I can't remember.
I'd like to say one thing about the dining room procedure. That dining room was so popular, weekdays and all, that when we went to lunch that worked there, we usually tried to go before noon or after 1 o'clock because there was a waiting line, which is a test to the chef that they had. And Jim was always at the door making sure nobody pushed ahead and got in before it was very well managed.
Hey, there were rowdy yahoos back then.
It was really a place. And of course, I think Murray mentioned that all the clubs in town met there, like the Rotary.
The Rotary,
Chamber,
yes,
Lions,
yes.
and all the ladies that had any size parties had them there. And if you wanted to see a style show, just be in my office, because when they came in, they were all dressed to the hilt. No pantsuits or things like we are now. But it really was it was really
Even
interesting.
gloves and hats.
And even though it was in September and a little hottish, you saw quite a few fur capes that were thrown over the arm, and it was just really kind of a time or period that we lived in, right?
Right, and no patent leather shoes after September.
No.
Those were summer shoes.
In the fall of '60, and President Kennedy was trying to secure the Democratic nomination, and his competition was, of course, Senator Johnson from Texas. And the local Democratic powers were in favor of Johnson. And I was standing in the lobby one day, I don't know what I was doing, but anyway, through the front door of the hotel came this fellow, and gee, that guy looks familiar. Well, it was Ted Kennedy. And he came in to see what he could do to talk those individuals into changing their minds to support his brother. And they had prearranged to have lunch in the dining room, so 10 or 12 of them are sitting there having lunch, and I got to take Ted Kennedy in and introduce him to the local Democrats, and that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I think that my philosophy when I was managing the hotel was to make it the center of the community and make people want to come there. And I was willing to sacrifice prices in the dining room in order to make that happen. But when a chain comes in and takes over a place like that, they have a corporate office that they have to answer to, and they base their success or failure on ratios of costs and things rather than thinking about trying to keep it the center of activity. And,
Or personal satisfaction.
you know, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
The Murray was the heart of the town. It was the heart of Silver City. So many people have said that. After it left and sort of went into decline, I think the Corner Cafe became the heart of the town. Now we don't have a heart. The Corner's gone. We've got to, so maybe the Murray's going to come back. And
Certainly.
and the new owners are certainly full of enthusiasm and vision and great plans.
It's a wonderful structure. It's very solid.
I was going to say, in my homework, they said it was, well, they didn't say this, but built like something out of brick, but steel reinforced.
It's steel and mortar. Yeah.
Steel and mortar.
So a wrecking ball wouldn't have been an answer in the first place
I
anyway.
don't think it would have worked.
No, no, I don't
think they
either. I think it would have bounced off of it, maybe. What do we want to discuss that I haven't brought up, or that, Nancy, you're sitting there so quietly, you had one of your children in the Murray.
Right. I think one thing we haven't mentioned was the wonderful people that actually lived there full time.
Oh, yeah.
We had a lady named Mrs. Burnside down at the other end of the hall, and the boys would run down and see her all the time. She was so sweet and nice.
Yeah.
There was a man named Mr. Phoenix.
Yeah.
Every day he'd take our oldest son down to the Shadle's Bakery to buy a cookie. And he never looked, he looked straight ahead, and Jimmy looked straight ahead, and they walked on down and back.
As far as we know, they didn't speak to each other, but
They had, they knew where they were going.
And that was something for Mr. Phoenix to spend money on a cookie for a child.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one of the thrills we all had when we had these terrible rains in the drainage for the city was very, very poor. You know what I'm going to lead up to, don't you? It's all right.
Oh, yes. Won't
And
forget
the
that
rain
day.
would come down. We had some
Oh.
torrential rains, you know, and it would just flood the streets. You couldn't even walk across Yankee and stuff. And we'd all go up to the elevator at the top and watch it gushing down. But poor old Jim was down in the basement trying
Bail in
to
the
make sure
basement.
the water didn't take him out. It was really something to behold. We didn't have movie cameras like that time. It would have been fun to have some of that, wouldn't it?
4th of July was really a big day for the hotel because of the big parade and the rodeo, and we just couldn't possibly stock enough beer to keep keep it going.
It would be flowing in the streets.
Yes.
You had a great view too. Did they ever shoot fireworks off the top of the Murray?
No, no.
I mean, the city didn't
Not
do
that I
that?
know. No, we.
No.
But a lot of folks would come in and we'd let them get on not the 5-story roof, but the lower roof to watch the parade. It was a great place to do that.
Well, you know, we've talked about the past of the Murray and the present, and there can only be speculation for the future because it's crystal ball. But what do you think the new generation of travelers will be attracted to in this region? What will they come to stay in a place like the Murray and to? Have you ever thought about that?
No, not really. I think that certainly the cliff dwellings and that beautiful country up there.
The enduring, the Gila wilderness and the architecture and of the town and those things. Of course, the art colony here wants to believe that this will be a draw as well. And
I hope that we regenerate the concept of the center of the community. And I think with the governmental offices nearby and the great expansion up and down both Bullard and Broadway, great potential for again resuming the sort of the focus or the center point of the community. I think it means a lot to the community to have that building brought back into tip-top shape.
tremendously.
You can understand fully the sentimental aspect for our family. Of course, that's not marketable. You can't convert that to any particular economic development or money, but I think for the whole community, it's kind of a symbol. And I'm just really delighted that these gentlemen are making an all-out effort to bring it back up to snuff. And I think it's unlimited possibilities. Obviously, that area is the center of the art galleries for the whole town, and I can visualize great potential for that type of activity in the hotel itself. That beautiful big ballroom, for example, make a magnificent gallery. I would hope that they could maybe arrange so that they could have great art shows there too, and yet have it as a large convention center type of.
now that,
You can imagine the excitement of those days when the ballroom was so frequently used, something going on all the time, and something that we could really be proud of. It was a magnificent facility.
the sounds of laughter and happiness.
And there's nothing physical in town that's been built that can compare with what's already
presence,
there. And
the Art
all it
Deco
needs is somebody to
presence.
come in there and know how to operate and get. We all long for a really nice dining room.
Yes.
And if that could ever be brought back, and I can see it having a great potential. And of course, I'm an old timer, and I'm probably a little sentimental about it too, but I think a lot of your younger people would like just a good restaurant like we had back then.
Yes, I think the time's coming back of dressing up, having maybe an evening out,
That's right.
sitting down, practicing your manners.
And one of the things that occurred when I was there, when we were there, is that a group of local people started a thing called the Society for the Preservation of Ballroom Dancing.
Oh, excellent. That could come back.
Yeah.
And that group had dances 6 or 7 times a year in the ballroom.
That would be a fantastic thing. I know a teacher right here in Silver City. I think people want to, we used to call that clutch dancing.
Well, if they'd go back to that, they'd have more room in the dance hall for more people, because as I see it now, they stand about this far apart, gyrating so much that there's not room for that many people, right, Murray?
That's right. So how many will the fire code let in that big ballroom?
I just have to speculate, but I would imagine 150 or more probably.
I bet it was packed on several
We
occasions.
have a couple of hundred at those dances.
Yeah.
And then the president of the college at the time, Jake Lloyd Miller, started I can't remember the name of the group, but we did it.
Was it Knife and Fork?
Knife and Fork Club, that's it. And a speaker would come from somewhere in the country, and the local members of the Knife and Fork Club would gather, and it was a banquet, and we'd hear a good speech.
Oh,
And the subject varied a lot, but that was a lot of fun.
the Knife and Fork Club. You know, we're all going to hear about that in the next few weeks. If people see this on TV, people say, oh, I remember I was a part of that. And I really believe that it would be appropriate to have another one of these shows if we possibly could and speak with the new owners, Kurt and Juliana, and get some sense of what they plan to do. I've heard just little snippets here and there, and I don't want to blow anybody's cover or reveal things that they don't want us to talk about, but it just sounds like the sky's the limit here. So,
There's a lot of potential, yes.
would y'all be willing to come back and talk again in this kind of format? We'd
We're
probably,
willing.
Yeah, creek doesn't rise. We can do it.
They had a grand opening when they have the dining room and all the lower floor started. It would be nice if Jim and Nancy could come back for that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
would.
wouldn't that? And
Well,
Murray and I'll be here.
absolutely.
I'll be here.
I'm not around, but
Well, you're close to it.
Family and
I
friends.
really love their whole family. As I was telling Jim earlier, and Murray knows that his mother, I kept up with her, and she lived to be over 100, but she was one great lady, I tell you. And so was the father, but he wasn't here as long, and I didn't see him as much as I did. But I'd come to work, and I'd see Lyda there, and she'd come talk to me, and I had just gotten back into business. I'd been a housewife for 17 years and decided I could go back to work. And she would come down, and she always pepped me up, saying, oh, you look so nice, you're so lively, and this and boy, then if I was pregnant when I left her, I was all wound up and away I'd go. But she just was that kind of a person.
I think good moods are contagious.
I'm talking about the grand opening. Oh, the grand opening stuff, okay.
You know. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.